Hey everyone, my name is Mike and I'm 17. Even though I'm going to talk a lot about a girl that I once really liked, this is not going to be a love story at all. Instead, it will be more about pain, embarrassment, and a dream that I recently realized might not come true. Many years ago, my grandparents came to this country having had a strong desire to have a better life for the future generations of our family. And our family, from time to time, still has pretty tough times with money. This was one of the reasons that I was looking for a job, even before I graduated from school. But to be honest, I wanted to work mostly because I always wanted to go to college to become the first one in my family who had a degree. Before my grandma died, I'd even promised her that I would do it. And now I had no right to let her down. I used to work at the school cafeteria, at the gas station, and in many other places. But not long before this story happened, I'd been lucky to get the best part-time job I could hope for, as a waiter in a very fancy and popular restaurant. There was not only a good salary, but I got some nice tips from its wealthy visitors, which meant I could save money for college in a year or so, and I desperately tried not to screw it up. Once, I noticed a beautiful girl who had just started to visit the restaurant pretty often. She was always surrounded by her friends, and judging by the way all of them were dressed and behaved, they seemed to come from very wealthy families. But the table she preferred to sit at was never served by me, so I had virtually no reason to talk to her. Also, as part of the staff, I definitely wasn't allowed to flirt with clients, unless I wanted to be booted. So I could only glance at her, sort of from behind the scenes. But one day, another waiter who used to serve her table stayed at home with the flu. He asked me to cover his shift, and that exact day she came into the restaurant alone. While approaching her table to take an order, I felt like I was on top of the world and extremely nervous at the same time. Of course, I didn't want to give my feelings for her away, but she suddenly said that she noticed how I was looking at her, and then she asked whether I was going to ask her out eventually. And completely speechless, she laughed and told me the address of the cafe she was going to be at later that day. Then she ordered a fresh tuna salad, and it was only once I was already in the kitchen that I realized that she had just asked me out herself. Of course, I did everything possible to meet her, and after a couple more dates, we had officially become a couple. But there was one problem. Because of our late dates, I was sometimes late to work. So often that my boss had even told me that his patience was wearing thin, and that I was close to losing my job. I tried to explain everything to Sophie. That was her name, by the way. But she didn't want to listen. She even began telling me about her girlfriend's relationships, and that their boyfriends would do anything for them. I tried to assure myself that we were going for a rough patch or something, and I promised Sophie that I'd try to be better for her once again. But then, something happened that was totally out of my control. Sophie was getting ready to have the biggest party ever, as she called it, and I was trying to finish everything that I needed to do at home and at school so I could be there like I promised her I would. But on the big day, my boss called and said that we were going to have an important dinner at our restaurant that night, and that everybody from the staff had to be at work. Otherwise, he'd be happy to fire all of us. I felt like I was torn into pieces. I knew that Sophie wouldn't forgive me for skipping her party, but I definitely couldn't afford to lose my job, especially taking into account that my father had recently lost his job, and now the well-being of the whole family pretty much depended on my salary. Be sure that that day I tried to reach Sophie by phone many times, but I always got sent to voicemail. She was probably too busy organizing her party and everything else. Finally, I just left around 10 messages saying how sorry I was and trying to explain everything to her, hoping that she would understand. I had to shift my focus to work. And I must say, it was the busiest dinner ever, so I wasn't able to check my phone until later that night. I was unpleasantly surprised that I didn't have a single text or missed call from Sophie. The next morning, when I had already slept off the previous shift, I tried to call Sophie once again, but I was unsuccessful. I was sure that I'd be able to see her at the restaurant and I rushed to work. I was not mistaken, by the way. She was there, as usual, surrounded by a company of friends with a guy next to her that I've never seen before. He, by the way, acted like he was Sophie's date, and she seemed not to mind at all. Imagine how surprised I was when the hostess of the restaurant said that her table demanded that I would be the one to serve them. I was calm and servile outside, going along with the situation. However, there was a hurricane of furiousness and wound up pride deep inside me. Sophie's friends were far from polite, especially that guy next to her, and she was acting as if nothing romantic had ever happened between us before. When they finally left her table, and didn't leave me a penny for a tip, by the way, I knew I had nothing else to do but to delete her from both my cell phone and my life. Time has passed and I've gotten over that situation. Even though it was the most humiliating experience I've ever had in my life, my dad found another job, which was even better paid than mine, so I could save all my money for college again. I've got this new colleague at work, Mary, who seems to be a nice girl, and soon I'm probably going to ask her out on a date. And speaking of Sophie, I've seen her a couple of times since then. During her last visit to our restaurant, she had a really bad fight with that guy. So bad that he yelled at her, telling her that she was still a spoilt little girl, and just left her all alone sitting at the table and crying really hard. Some part of me felt pity for her, but I mostly thought she probably deserved it,